Welcome back to a very merry edition of Book Turned Movie. Today, we will be looking at an often overlooked, and yet all the same fantastic Christmas film, The Polar Express. Released in 2004, The Polar Express was notable for its phenomenal advancement in computer animation, for better or for worse. Even back when the film first released, one of its biggest criticisms was how uncanny the characters were. Since the primary focus was on realism, there wasn't much leeway in the characters' expressions, or lack thereof. Although it was praised by critics for its fantastical story, and even though its characters haven't aged the best, the environment still looked phenomenal 2 decades later. The film also did great at the box office. Okay, kind of. Depends on your perspective. The movie's initial run earned over $280 million, which is certainly nothing to shake a stick at. However, that's against a budget of $170 million, which made it the most expensive animated film to produce at the time. Just as a frame of reference, The Incredibles released around the same time, which only had a budget of $92 million, and it made over $600 million at the box office. So, despite The Polar Express making a decent profit, it wasn't exactly what Warner Brothers was hoping for. But even with the comparatively low sales, as well as a very mixed critical reception, the movie still has managed to secure a loyal fan base over the years, mostly due to the movie's very unique take on Christmas. The story follows a boy named Chris, who has found himself too old to believe in Santa anymore. On Christmas Eve night, a train appears in front of his house. He boards the train as it heads to the North Pole. Along the way, he meets other children. He keeps a girl from getting kicked off the train, has a roof adventure with a homeless guy, enjoys some delicious hot chocolate, and nearly sinks in a frozen lake. Somehow, he manages to get to the North Pole in one piece. And after yet another wacky turn of events, he finally comes face to face with Santa Claus himself. Chris's holiday spirit returns to him, all the kids reflect on the lessons they learned, and everyone wakes up to an amazing Christmas morning. Alright, let me be upfront with you really quick. How I normally do these videos is, I will cover the plot of the movie, discuss the deeper aspects of it, and then I talk about the book and how the two versions differ. However, this is gonna be a big exception. That plot I told you is near 1-to-1 with the book. Chris doesn't believe in Santa, gets on the train, does some sightseeing, enjoys some hot chocolate, meets Santa, and then goes home. So you could say that the book is a bit more simplified than the movie, but more accurately, the movie is just a more expanded version of the book, which might be a first for this series. Everything else we've covered so far has either been super loose adaptations or have taken generous liberties when retelling these stories. So, on the surface, this movie appears to be the perfect adaptation, faithful to the source material, but expands it greatly so it fits into a movie-length runtime. Which leads to the question, what all did the movie add to the plot? Well, for starters, there's more focus on the characters, the conductor, the other children, and even Charlie himself. While the books were more about a fun trip to see Santa, the movie tried to frame this as an experience to help teach the children valuable lessons, which I think was a good way to expand the purpose of this voyage. The entire section involving the homeless guy on the roof was also new for the film. And like a lot of people, this scene really confused me for years. I was never entirely sure what point they were trying to make here. The hobo appears as if he's a freeloader just hitching a ride on the train, but then we end up learning that he's more of a spiritual entity. The hobo reveals that he believes in Santa, but he just doesn't respect him. We never get a real idea about the man's origins, but he claims to be the king of the North Pole. It's unclear what he is, who he is, what his motivations are, and what lesson he was seemingly trying to show the boy. As a kid, I assumed the implication was that the hobo was some kind of future version of Chris, showing him how he'd turn out if he didn't recover his Christmas spirit. And while I've spent years trying to grasp what the intentions of this scene is, in actuality, it probably isn't that deep. It's most likely there just to pad out the runtime rather than fleshing out the story. Which is fine, because the rooftop scene is still really fun, but it's just one scene that's always perplexed me. I don't quite understand it. Another scene that's kinda not from the book is the infamous hot chocolate scene. While I do believe the film itself is often overlooked, this scene couldn't be further from that. This is the song of hot chocolate time! Back when I was in school, they played this song nearly every year when they give us hot cocoa. And for a bit of transparency, I work at a nursing home now. And every year they have the workers recreate the scene while playing the music as we serve the residents hot cocoa. There is no generational gap for this song. And 20 years later, it still has a firm grip on us during Christmas time. The scene itself is just really good, and it's one of the highlights of this film. Out of all the scenes added to pad out the runtime, this is by far the best. And as I mentioned, it's only kinda new because in the book, they did get to drink hot chocolate, it just wasn't as spectacular as it is here. Some other notable changes are with the ice escape scenes and the North Pole exploration scenes. It's just a fun little action segment to further pad the runtime. Really, most of the stuff added in this film is to just fill the movie's length. But there's a lot of really neat character moments that do a great job of fleshing out the story. Especially the train conductor, voiced by Tom Hanks, and the hobo, also voiced by Tom Hanks, and Charlie, whose narration is voiced by Tom Hanks. And yeah, legitimately, most of the cast is just Tom Hanks. I'm even voiced by Tom Hanks. The movie was made around the height of his popularity, and the reason he's in a lot of this film is because he's actually a big reason it got made to begin with. In 1999, Tom Hanks was reading the book to his children, and he had such a fun time voicing the conductor and Santa, he thought it would be really fun to voice them in a movie. So he started pushing the idea around for studios to start adapting it. The book's author, Chris von Allsburg, had several offers to adapt the book prior, but yeah, he was nervous about selling off the film rights to it. And that was before he learned that it was Tom Hanks himself pushing for a film adaptation. That gave him full confidence that his book was in good hands. And, despite the movie's flaws, I think it really was. This movie is a really good adaptation. It stays very faithful to the source material while fleshing out the story with more scenes. It doesn't change anything. It just adds upon what's already there. That, to me, is possibly the best way to adapt a book. And it's not only a faithful adaptation in its story, but as you've noticed by now, the movie, its whole aesthetic, is actually pretty spot on to the book. It has a very realistic, hand-painted style, and it looks so good, especially with the environments, which, by the way, is pretty much what most of the book is. It's just environmental shots, and as for the uncanny look of the film's characters, that can just be seen as a byproduct of this art style. However, the book actually had a trick to mostly avoid that situation. There's almost no front-face shots of any of the characters in this book. There are a few, but, a majority of them show the characters from the side or from behind, and some have their faces just slightly off-screen. This would be really hard to accomplish in the film itself, so the uncanny look is just a compromise for reaching these amazing environmental shots that were years ahead of their time. And that's another thing critics praise the film for. Most Christmas movies focus on the bright lights and cheery music and the overall festive atmosphere, but in this book and movie, the focus is less on that stuff and is more on just the winter atmosphere in general, showcasing how nature looks in winter and the comfort found in the environment we celebrate Christmas in. That is what makes Polar Express stand out from a lot of other Christmas stories. And I appreciate that level of craftsmanship. So, as far as which version of this story is superior, that's going to depend entirely on your tastes. If you're a fan of the general premise of The Polar Express, but dislike the film's flaws, then the book is your preferred experience. But if you like all the stuff added to the movie, then you'll prefer that compared to the trimmed-down book. As far as my personal tastes, I think it's obvious. It's the movie. But regardless, both are perfect to welcome in the festive spirit of the holidays. So, yeah, I definitely recommend checking either of them out as we end the year and welcome in the next. I think that's all I have to say on this topic. If you'd like to see more videos like this, where I discuss the source material of some animated films, then be sure to let me know in the comments below. Also, subscribing would really help support the content we make. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.